but take a look at the top 10 overall classes so far. And again, this is a combination of both transfer portal and high school players. You see Duke there atop the class. They have 8 new bodies coming in. Remember, only 2 players going back to John Shire next year. Alabama is number 2 with 7, followed by, you can see it's a mashup there. And it's not just about the volume of the commits here. It's about the quality too. So it's a combination of our algorithm assessing the quality and quantity. And there he is himself, Isaac Trotter, helping us break down the schools that have gotten the most done so far. All right, Isaac, obviously, the place that everybody wants to talk about is Fayetteville, Arkansas, where John Calipari is coming to town. His house is on the market in Lexington, and he's bringing some guys with him to Arkansas. What do you think of the roster rebuild that we've seen so far in Arkansas?
Yeah, it's fun because if you kind of looked at the portal, I've been kind of breaking down like the best available, and I kind of like to separate it into different tiers. And if you're looking for the best scoring guard, it's probably Nelly Davis out of Florida Atlantic. And if you're looking for the most well-rounded all-around big man, it's probably Jonas Adu out of Tennessee. And Arkansas gets both of those guys. So I just feel like John Calipari has really flexed his muscles here in this transfer portal cycle. The ability to add these two type of talents just really changes the floor and the ceiling combination. Because, you know, when we talk about Janelle Davis, like the ability to score from all 3 levels, he's a big-time alpha guard. He's played on huge stages. Like, you need those to win. And then Adu, you know, you can go back and forth on transfer portal rankings, but what I like about big men is just guys that can play a lot of different roles. And Adu, you can play multiple different versions of drop coverage with him. He can head screens. He can switch everything. He's so athletic. You know, you've already added the ability to score at the rim with Nelly Davis. And then also Adu, back to the basket game, has a little bit of a jumper. You add the recruiting class that he's brought over from Kentucky with all of these different 5-stars to the mix. Like, it's just really, really talented. And I think we all expected John Calipari to be able to get talent at Arkansas, but the ability that they've had to buff up their NIL game is really showcasing right now in the transfer portal, because they're near the top of the list for literally like all of these top elite transfers. And it's because of the money that they're able to throw around. And there's haves and have-nots in college basketball, and Arkansas has quickly showcased that they're one of the haves.
Yeah, some of the numbers being associated specifically with Nelly Davis, alleged 7-figure offers. But here's the thing I would emphasize. You know, what is on social media is not necessarily reality. Sometimes it is, because this is very much a buyer's market. But what makes this tough to really gauge how much these players are earning is that there are no contracts, you know, and there's really not even a way to enforce these prices. So it's going to be really interesting. This is all kind of speculative at this point to see who is paying what. But as I said, the number around Nelly Davis in particular is a daunting one. Isaac, want to ask you about Arkansas because their work is not done yet. As you mentioned, they brought 3 players out of the high school ranks. It seems like this is a group that is going to need multiple bodies still, and also a pure point guard, because as I wrote about last week, Boogie Flan to me is a combo guard. He's played with the more traditional point guard in both the EYBL and in the high school ranks. I think Billy Richmond can help alleviate some of those ball handling responsibilities, but he is more of a secondary guy as well. Can they share the ball? I think they can, but I think that's going to be easier for them down the road. Could say the same thing about Nelly Davis. This is a guy who was a wing when he came into FAU and has really improved his guard skills, but is certainly not a lead guard. So is there still a void in this backcourt that you expect John Calipari and his staff to try and fill here in the coming days and weeks?
Definitely. And I also think you're looking for perimeter size too, right? Nelly Davis around 6'4", Boogie Fland. You have some questions about them size-wise defensively. So you need, you know, a lead guard that can get the ball to the rim, but also can give you something defensively with that positional size. The thing is if you need a point guard right now in the transfer portal, like that's the position to have, because there is a lot of really good names. We've talked about Kadari Richmond. You heard that earlier in the show. Des Claude is a transfer out of Xavier who I really like. I think defensively, there's a lot there to his game too, and just with plus size. So there's like 15, 16, 17 lead guards in the transfer portal that are still available that I think would make a ton of sense. And, you know, if you're looking at Arkansas, just with what they've done so far in the portal, I'm curious to see how this budget, you know, kind of progresses with their NIL budget and the war chest that they have right now. But they've proven that they're at the top of the food chain. And I'm curious if they're going to be able to go and flex their muscles for one of those lead guards that we're talking about. If you get one with size there, that feels like the real missing piece for this roster as it starts to come together.
I think Des Claude and Kadari Richmond are just thrilled that you referred to them as point guards. I think that's going to make them very happy, and I think the coaches are going to have their own set of opinions on that. But I celebrate it. Hey, this is a players show, everybody. Players show we got here. All right, now let me ask you about this. John Calipari goes to Arkansas. He leaves Kentucky, and he leaves Mark Pope with almost a total rebuild. Travis Perry was the only member of that high school recruiting class to stick around, but we have seen Mark Pope start to add players by the masses out of the transfer portal here. Where do we assess where he is at in this rebuilding project at this point?
This is smart. This is smart business. I feel like Mark Pope, I guess he had some doubters, I think, at the beginning of like, hey, what type of talent can we bring in? And so far, so good, because every single one of the transfers that they've added to this mix just makes a ton of sense. Amari Williams, transfer out of Drexel, I think he's one of the best playmaking big men in the portal. Brandon Garrison, super athletic. I think you can see him be an impactful defensive piece for them. Andrew Carr, Wake Forest, really good stationary catch and shoot guy. Otega Owe, he's one of like my flag plants in this class. Like, I really like him. I think he's an underrated player who's going to be a big piece of the future, especially with what he can do in transition. You add Kobe Brea out of Dayton, arguably the best shooter in college basketball. So all of these different pieces coming together, and it's starting to feel like, man, like we know that Mark Pope offensively, you're going to have a really good plan with what they do, but the pieces in place here are really, really complementary of each other, because that rim pressure, you got it at Otega Owe. You got that defensive first piece out of Lamont Butler. You have another elite defender in Amari Williams, elite defender in Otega Owe, elite defender in Lamont Butler. It's like all of these guys are two-way guys. And what was the issue with Kentucky last year? They didn't have that. So I just feel like Mark Pope has come in and done a really nice job of rounding out this roster with different pieces that work together well. We'll see how it comes together right in November. But I mean, the process here seems really, really sound for Mark Pope and this Kentucky staff.
There's two things that stand out to me about this Kentucky group so far, and you mentioned one of it, and that is defense. And there's a reason why he said elite defender, elite defender, elite defender. He's targeting two-way players here. And the other thing that I think, we are not talking enough about, everybody recognizes that he's getting defenders. The other thing that I don't think we are recognizing is that he is getting guys who can really pass the ball, specifically in the front court. You look at those front court pieces, and you've got guys who are going to be able to, I use the term, unlock his playbook. And he had that at BYU. And listen, we've talked a lot about that system and the amount of threes they took and how that opened up the lane. But it's really difficult to open up the lane unless you have bigs who can step out, make a shot, handle the ball within the offense, and pass the ball. There's different things you can do creativity from a creative standpoint, but if you don't have bigs who can space, who can think, who can do different things with the ball, there's only so much you can do from a playbook standpoint. And I think he got those bigs. I don't know if any of them are like, huge NBA prospects. I think that's something that you've heard the doubters say, like, hey, where's all the NBA guys? I don't know about that, but I think you've got two-way guys who are versatile on both ends of the floor. They play both ends and they can do different things on both ends, and that's going to allow him to coach the way he wants to coach based on what we saw at BYU. So that to me is really interesting. All right, we mentioned this. The team that is atop the recruiting rankings right now with 8 new bodies is Duke. They are only bringing back 2. They've got Caleb Foster coming back, and they've got Tyrese Proctor coming back. But outside of that, John Shire is rebuilding a totally new roster. What do we think of what he's been able to accomplish so far in the portal specifically?
Yeah, I just feel like they fixed their needs with what they needed. They needed veterans and they needed role players who wanted to be role players. And I think sometimes it's harder for some of those 5-star freshmen to come in and embrace being a role player. I think it's a whole lot easier when you bring in a Mason Gillis out of Purdue and you bring in a Malik Brown out of Syracuse, who, they had really low usage rates last year. Like they're used to playing around really good players and understanding, hey, I'm the 4th best guy on the floor, and that's okay. So yes, this recruiting class that Duke has brought in is, so filled with star power. Obviously, Cooper Flagg at the very top of that list. But I'm really looking at those transfers that they've added as just additive, high-level pieces that just aren't going to hurt you. And I think that's what you kind of needed when you get Caleb Foster back. Because yes, Jeremy Roach leaving, I think, is a real loss and probably the biggest loss, of this transfer portal cycle. But I think it does unlock Caleb Foster to be able to take a huge year 2 jump. And if he reaches his ceiling and we see Tyrese Proctor get a little bit better in year 3, you obviously have Cooper Flagg, who we expect to be one of the most impactful impactful freshman in college basketball. You have the top recruiting class. Like you need those role players to be really, really good. And John Shire has done that. Although he has work to do. Duke, we've talked about it in the past. Like they need more pieces. I'm looking for a downhill guard. And if they can get that out of the transfer portal, just a guy who can get 2 feet to the paint and spray it out, that feels like the last missing piece of this roster construction where I'll be really, really bullish on Duke if they can get that done.
All right. Now, you heard Travis say just a few moments ago that North Carolina was going to be hosting Big Cliff for a visit this weekend. Obviously, they are still looking for the replacement for Armando Bacot up front. Where are we at with UNC's roster construction at this point, and what we forecast them to try and accomplish here in the next few weeks?
I'm really curious about them in the next 12 hours. I think that they've done a fantastic job of keeping their guys out of the transfer portal.
Right.
But you get RJ Davis back, you get Seth Trimble back. Does that make Elliot Cadeau be like, hey, where's my spot in this mix? Right. If you're going after big game hunting in the transfer portal for bigs, like, does that make Jalen Washington go, hey, like, where's my role in this? So if they're able to keep those two guys along with the recruiting class that they have coming in, Ian Jackson, Drake Powell, who we expect to be impactful freshmen for them, like, I would be really bullish on this team because you add Cade Tyson. I think a lot of people assumed he's the Harrison Ingram replacement. I really think he's way more the Cormac Ryan replacement for what he can do from a shooting perspective. And I'm bullish on him defensively. I think his defensive tape is a little bit better than what some might think. He had some real great stretches against Tucker DeVries, the star from Drake, who's now at West Virginia, one of the best transfers in this cycle. Regarded him pretty well. So I think Cade Tyson's going to help them out a little bit. But if they can keep Elliot Cadeau and Jalen Washington, to add to RJ Davis coming back, I mean, we're talking about the best backcourt in college basketball potentially next year. You go in the portal, say you can get, a Cliff Amore, like, you're talking about North Carolina having that UConn feel of elite retention mixed with elite high school recruiting, mixed with the right sprinkle of the right transfers that fill our holes. And that's kind of the recipe, I think, to win a national title. And I think we've seen North Carolina execute a first couple steps of that plan, and we'll see if they can execute step 3 and step 4 here in the next couple weeks.
I wonder, too, if it's a foregone conclusion that Harrison Ingram is gone, because aside from what we can say his impact was between the lines last year, I was talking to the guys from Inside Carolina who do such a phenomenal job of covering everything North Carolina. And the point they made to me is that his impact, along with Cormac Ryan, it was so important for the chemistry of this team. And listen, we can talk a lot about talent, rightfully so, but North Carolina, the difference between the 2023-24 version versus the 22-23 version was chemistry. I mean, these guys got along. There was a cohesiveness. There was, as they put it, somebody like Harrison Ingram, he brought a joy to the team and a willingness to accept his role and do his job to the best of his ability that maybe wasn't there a year before. So, yes, it's great when you get guys like RJ Davis back. But to the previous point about Duke, you got to make sure you get the right connectors back, too. And the people who are going to be okay being the third best offensive option on the floor, the people who are going to be okay doing the defensive dirty work and moving the ball. Otherwise, this doesn't work. And let's face it, a year ago, we were celebrating a lot of transfer classes that was just about sheer talent acquisition, and the pieces didn't fit because there weren't guys who were willing to take on sometimes a complementary role. So that's why someone like Harrison Ingram, I think, is going to be really interesting in his process here in the next few weeks, whether he decides to stay in the draft or head back to Carolina. All right, Isaac, this is you mentioned UConn, and now we're going to talk about UConn because UConn has added 3 pieces since their national championship. Liam McNeely from the high school ranks, Terrace Reed, who will now become one of 2 centers on the roster along with Samson Johnson, and then Aiden Mahaney, the much-needed guard who will come in and presumably have a chance to be a lead guard in the Huskies' intricate offensive system. Tell me what you like about those 3 guys and if you have any concerns.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation with Dan Hurley because I listened to his podcast with JJ Redick, which was phenomenal, and I would encourage anyone to check that out. He was just basically, he wants high-level processors, guys who are really, really smart. And I think they did that. Liam McNeely, I think, is one of the smarter freshmen, just his impact on winning. We've seen that. Aiden Mahaney, I think he would tell you he didn't have a very good sophomore season last year at St. Mary's, but I'm bullish on him being able to find himself at UConn, and we've seen them be a really good player development program. So you add like the different pieces here. Even Terrace Reed, like he got a lot of, some of the, hey, Michigan's really bad, and Terrace Reed looks out of position. Maybe he's a big reason for why Michigan's not reaching its ceiling. I totally disagree agreed with that. I thought Terrace Reed had a lot of moments last year where he was dousing fires left and right defensively, and he wasn't necessarily getting the ball as much as he wanted, but he was still playing really, really hard. So I like the pieces that they have in place. But this is a transfer portal class that's honestly a huge bet on UConn's player development, because they could have easily tried to over-recruit over Salo Ball or Jalen Stewart, right? Like they could have tried to get upgrades of guys who are more proven, at high major college basketball players, and they didn't. And those guys have stayed. Those freshmen are now they're going to become sophomores, and they need them to be, make a big, big jump. And if they get Alex Caravan back, right, who has a really interesting NBA stay or go decision for the 2024 NBA draft, if they get him back, we're talking about one of the best teams in the Big East. If not, I think you could see UConn start to flex their muscles in the transfer portal cycle again, looking for, another fort. And guess what? There's some really good ones too. I would keep an eye on Coleman Hawkins, just entered the draft as well. He also just entered the portal. If he's a piece that they're looking for at the 4, he could be, a really interesting addition for them if Caravan opts to stay in the draft.
I think they're done, to be honest with you. I think that they are committed to their young guys. I think they'd love to get Caravan back. And it's interesting. It was 8 hours before that national championship game, and it was out in Phoenix. And the point I made, it was on HQ, and I said, listen, Alex Caravan, in 8 hours from now, his decision is going to be the most important one when it comes to the roster construction of the 2024-25 version of UConn. And right now it is. And he's got a chance to come back and solidify himself. This is not an exaggeration. He could solidify himself as having the most successful career in UConn history. And think about what that means. I mean, this guy's been there 2 years. He's won 2 national championships. He would love to play his way into the first round. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think someone like the Celtics could give him a real hard look. But the opportunity to come back, to be the clear focal point, and to make a run at when you leave this saying, you know what, there is no one who ever wore a UConn jersey who had a better career than me. I mean, that's some pretty incredible stuff. And I agree with you. That is one of, if not the most fascinating NBA decision that we have on the horizon. Isaac, as always, thank you for your perspective. You are always as researched and prepared as anyone, and we appreciate you and enjoy all your content. You can find more of Isaac at 247sports.com. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube channel for all the latest in college basketball and football recruiting. We will see you again real soon. Thanks for watching.